The blue zones demonstrate that when it comes to longevity, who we surround ourselves with, what we eat, and how we manage stress all play a crucial role. So, what does that look like in practice? Now, we emphasize the importance of a tribe, but that is different than a sense of belonging we discussed before. Why?
Right. So there's some overlap, but belonging, as we talked about, is about a connection to each other, but a connection to, a higher power. The importance of a tribe is, where people feel interconnected and they share the same habits. So, good habits are contagious. Bad habits are contagious. So the nice thing about blue zones is they were set up with the other power nines to have an environment that promoted health and wellness and longevity. And so again, like I mentioned, they're not thinking they're doing anything special. They're just doing what everybody else around them is doing, and their parents did, and their parents' parents did. And it's just a natural way of life for them. And so they follow through, they follow through with these groups of people. Like in Japan, they have these moais where they are, connected from birth to, when they're 80s, 90s, and 100, and they just support each other through the ups and downs of life, but they follow the same health habits.
So, okay, but we don't live in the blue zone. How do we help people make some small steps to build some stronger relationships in our society, in our crazy society?
Right. I think it requires you first to do some self-reflection and find out what matters to you and what's important to you. And then it gets you to step outside of your comfort zone to find people who have the same kind of who have the same interest in promoting health for themselves, right? So, like I said, bad habits are contagious. So if you're hanging around people who are, smoking, the chances are you may be more inclined to start smoking or drinking alcohol. Or, if you're hanging around people who eat a highly processed diet and go out to eat every night, you're more likely to follow suit with that, as opposed to finding your tribe of people. And that's why exercising in groups helps people stick to that habit a little better, because they have accountability.
Right. Now, another thing they talk about is any amount of alcohol, we've been told, is not good, but yet.
Yes. I know you're going to say.
I know these cultures, they have some use.
Yes.
Not extreme, but some use.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I think the important thing to remember is the context in which they are drinking.
Okay.
Right. First of all, they're drinking, typically wine. They're not drinking hard liquor, coolers with tons of sugar, lots of beers. They're not throwing back, alcohol as a means to cope.
Right.
Which is kind of, the pattern in North American country, most North American, countries, and in Europe and other, developed countries, is we're using alcohol to escape. They use alcohol as a part of socializing with each other at dinner. It's connection is involved, right? And they're not drinking to excess. They're having one, maybe two glasses at a time per day, and they're enjoying it slowly. They're savoring it. They're not using it as an escape. And I think the context is different.
So who has the wine at 5 that we heard about? What culture was that?
Sardinia.
Yeah.
It's Italy. I'm Italian. I should know this, right? And they drink their wine at 5, and but it's not just, they don't just go for a drink. They're sitting down with a meal. Or if they are having a drink they're having it in community. They're not isolated by themselves, drinking away, privately with shame. They're using it as a means of connection and hearing each other's stories. And that, again, releases this flood of really positive healing neurochemicals that just quell inflammation in the body.
It has such a major effect on our parasympathetic system,
system,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, what about the plant slant diet? Talk to me about that. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, we know, in lifestyle medicine that, mostly plants. Plant fiber is really key for health. It feeds our microbiome. It really fosters, a release of, again, byproducts that quell inflammation when we feed our gut microbes, fiber. And so it's no wonder that when we're looking at what the blue zones are eating, they're not meat. I shouldn't say that. The Seventh-day Adventists tend to be vegetarian.
Okay.
But all the other blue zones do consume meat, but they're consuming it maybe 5-6 times a month, and their portions are very small. And
that is really,
it's not a lot.
Scarce.
Yeah, but they really focus on beans. All the blue zones across the board eat at least a cup of beans a day.
Lots of beans.
Lots of beans. whole natural foods. And again, these foods, even the meats that they're eating, are grazed in pastures, that they are raising. They're not factory farmed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last question. 80-20 rule.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Yes.
Hari hachibu.
Hara hashibu. It is prevalent in Okinawa, Japan, and it means eat till you're 80% full. And that just allows you to, recognize that, you don't want to overfill yourself. You don't want to eat a little bit less.
And with that, we're not going to overfill ourselves. Stay with us.